I'm the Spencer Chan is back, and we're back with another episode of Anime Binge Club. Coming up soon, you're going to see us get through the quickest episode of this podcast yet. That's right, we're talking about episode 6. What was it, Kevin?
I don't know. Yeah, that sounds right.
6? I think it was episode 6 on Anime Binge Club. Hit the theme. All right, welcome back to Anime Binge Club, the only podcast that has an introduction that's thought out and is well recited by someone who knows what they're doing. I'm your host, Spencer Crinden, and I'm joined with my buddy Kevin Day. What's up, Kevin?
Hey man, I'm pumped about this. I really like the episode we watched. I'm getting so much more into this, so I'm excited to talk to you about this today.
That's awesome. I keep thinking of again about like what anime would we watch next, and man, I don't know. And the thing is, it's like I want to watch more than one anime at the same time, and I don't want to watch the whole thing or do one episode per. Let's see how fast we can get through this episode. I feel like I really like this episode, but I feel like it was more literal in like action oriented than a lot of episodes have been thus far, and that makes it maybe less interesting or less dense for me to break down psychologically. I also watched this one less. We've watched a lot of these episodes and I've watched them multiple times. I've only watched this one once, so compared to ones I've rewatched 3 or 4 times, this time around I only watched it once, so I have less of like a strong take on it anyway. But yeah,
and I watched this just before we started recording this, so it's fresher in my mind. So we're maybe gonna have I might have more to talk about this time.
Yeah, but that's the thing is like I don't know if there will have been like thinking about it and dwelling about it and rewatching it and being like, oh, I didn't know. It'll be a pretty straight hit. But okay, so I want to I've been thinking about trying to just go really fast through like a summary of the plot and then talking it through a bit slower. So let me just try and do that. Episode 6 is Shinji has just deployed and just got hit by a laser from this new angel that looks like a D8. And so that's where the cliffhanger on the last episode is. So we're recapping. He gets hit by the laser. They're like, oh shit. They pull Shinji down in his robot back underground and they take him to the hospital. They start like messing with the robot to fix it. The angel starts drilling into the ground and it's like, oh, the angel is coming for Nerve HQ, which is in the geofront. It's underground in this big thing that we've talked about, this big kind of biome. They start experimenting. They put up like fake Evas and it turns out that like, they're figuring out how to beat it. They're putting together like a sci-fi plan and they need a gun and they need to, figure out how to fire the gun and stuff. And then Shinji wakes back up and they get together and Shinji like argues with Rei and ultimately they come together and they destroy the angel. So that's like the big kind of thing. It's mostly pretty literal about the putting together of the plan. And then in terms of like psychological stuff, there's like, this stuff between Shinji and Rei at the end of the episode. But other than that, I don't think it's as dense as these episodes, right? Just, very off the cuff basics. What do you think about that I've been saying?
No, I agree. And I almost felt like, I either need to go back and watch this again or I was missing something because there didn't seem to be as much. There were less metaphors, there was less imagery, there was less, pregnant pauses. You let a mood just hang in the air for a while. This one wasn't as awe-inspiring as the previous ones. Like, there weren't many scenes that I looked at and went, wow, that's a painting right there. This was more a lot of, we have some story to get through right now, and this episode is going to be devoted to getting through this piece of the story so that we can get back to world building.
Yeah, exactly. So, in the past, we've talked about ways to save money, money saving shots, bottle episode kind of ideas. I don't think they're saving money the same way in this episode because there's a lot of action, but it feels very rushed. A lot of the characters feel very sloppily designed. They look a lot different in animation. you have this thing called like the style guide or whatever. You have all these guides that show you how a character's supposed to look, and those are called the character models, and sometimes they're called character turns. And they often have faces and different expressions to kind of explain like kind of rules about how to draw this character. And you would say that a lot of the designs in this episode were off model. They just look completely different line drawing wise, like a different style of artist, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and that's it's really good that you brought that up because when Shinji was in the hospital and Rei comes to see him, I didn't realize that was her until the very end of that scene. I thought that was like a random nurse or something, like played by the same voice actor or something, because she looked
Hmm.
so different there. And I can't even really put my finger on. I mean, her hair was a little bit different, but she wasn't acting much like herself. She wasn't, you know, she wasn't posed the same way. I don't think,
Hmm.
because like in previous episodes, she was a little bit more aloof standing, where here she was just standing professionally, and like I think she's like holding a cart or something and brings him his food and all this. I had no idea that was Ray at first. And then I felt stupid for not realizing that because of course it had to be, because who else would have that conversation with him?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, like we could measure it on artistic merit or whatever, or at least our opinions on it. But like I don't think Ray's design looked as good. I don't think any of the characters looked as good in this episode. But I think, I talked about in the last episode, there's this shot of Ray like coming out of the shower, and it's like one of the most iconic shots of anime. The shot at the end of this episode is Ray kind of smiling, and that's also a relatively iconic and well-known shot. And to me, that shot just looks like shit. Like it just like it doesn't look like that picture of Ray doesn't look good. It's not like it doesn't like the line work is a lot thicker and blunter. It's less sharp. It's fuzzier and yeah. And so like it just like so these are both really iconic shots of Ray. They're back to back episodes that like one to me looks really like iconic and stunning, and the other looks kind of like are oddly like shit. And it also looks forced, but it seems like maybe forced is intentional as part of like the artist's intention. But to talk about the art just a little bit, I don't know like where this manifests. I don't like this can be a thing in Western animation, and I think it's a thing in Japanese, but it all depends. But sometimes you can get like an assistant or an artist who like their job is to focus on one character. So you have like this is Kitsuragi's artist, and they draw Kitsuragi in all the scenes the same way you have background artists, and they draw the backgrounds. So you might have people that are good at focusing on certain characters, and it might be that different people were assigned to those characters in this episode. It might be that they didn't have so much time to do refinements. I don't know. But to me, I got the sense that different people were drawing those characters. The backgrounds and stuff, a lot of the props looked about the same art wise. So those artists were probably the same. But to me, I got the sense that, yeah, these characters are being drawn by someone entirely different. But who knows? Interesting to think about, though, for sure. Um, so Shinji gets hit really bad. Obviously, he gets his chest melted by this laser, and when they take him out, he has like this nosebleed. Again indicating like, oh, you can get really fucked up, even though probably it didn't like the laser didn't hurt him. So maybe that's just because like the brain tie with the machine, right? And the angel starts drilling, but they call it a shield tunnel or a tunneling shield. Did you catch that, or what did they call it in your translation?
I can't remember, but I remember it stuck out to me as being an unusual way that they phrased it.
Yeah, like I would have called it a drill. The D8 starts drilling into the ground to try and access the geofront. And they say, oh, it has a tunneling shield. Now they've talked about AT fields, and angels have these things called AT fields that can make them basically invincible. And I don't know if this is what they're going for, but it seems like maybe they're saying, oh, it's AT field is the thing that's actually doing the drilling, and that's kind of how they're doing it terminologically. But it just ends up being like a bit weird.
And
Um,
also, just speaking of the art about the drill specifically, and I know this is me being a nerd and worrying about things no one should care about. The drill is spinning backwards. If that was an actual drill with a curve that way, it's going in reverse. It would not actually be going down. It would be pulling itself up, and that
oh
bothered
man.
me every time they showed the drill. I'm like that the drill is spinning the wrong way.
I gotta see that. I want to go back and see that, but that's so funny. I mean, in a lot of things, sometimes the visual is assumed that it's spinning so fast that you're only seeing, the moments where it's a little bit regressed, So maybe they're going for that, but I don't know. It does seem like no, we're just watching it drill normal speed. So if it's in reverse, that's super funny. But I didn't catch that at all. That's awesome though. Okay, so the angel starts drilling. Um, so like there's a lot of like reflections, a lot of like reversals in this episode. One of the first one that happens is when we see Shinji get rushed off into the OR. Like he looks a lot like Ray has looked in the very beginning of the series when she was like medically in trouble. And so in the beginning, we see Shinji gets in the robot fundamentally because he wants to save Ray, who is in this medical state of helplessness. And now he is in the same medical state of helplessness in a way that he hasn't been during active problems. He got knocked out in the fight that he got knocked out during, but when he's in medical distress, that the fight's over, right? So now he's fucking like, so there's this role reversal. Which I thought was interesting. And then they just do a bunch of like sci-fi mumbo jumbo. This is like this anime trope. It's Dragon Ball Z stuff. It's battle anime stuff. Shonen is like anime for like young boys. It's usually pretty action driven. But it's also, teen boys. Like most popular manga, Naruto, One Piece, Dragon Ball, it's all shonen. And it just has this like super hyper analyzing, intellectualizing thing where, there's people and the way it's talking, it's kind of like they're debating and fighting, where it's like, you need so much energy to overcome a shield like that. And it's like, I know where to get the energy. And they're like, you can't mean you'd have to break the laws of physics, and not the laws of physics. Which laws? And it's like it's kind of this verbal combat, even though they're on the same side. And anime loves doing that. And so you just get a lot of that. They put out this dummy Ava. They put out a tank, and they're like, it shoots the Ava because it knows it looks like an Ava. It shoots the tank because the tank shot at it. And we're seeing, and we find out that there's this range where outside of this range, it doesn't detect us. So maybe we can shoot it from outside this range. And then they're like, but what can penetrate its shields? We need such and such energy. And they're like, we know how to get the energy. We need all of Japan's energy, and we know how to get the rifle. We need this rifle that this military is making. We'll just steal it using our government stealing powers, and that's just classic setup action, Ocean's 11 shit. And again, it's not very analyzable. It's just cool action sci-fi shit with mecha, which is a big part of mecha. So I don't know. Again, like I don't think there's too much to talk about there. It's just very cool. A positron rifle, there's just the idea of the AT fields comes up a couple times. Do you have any thoughts on that kind of just general sci-fi stuff? I think it sets up that Kitsuragi is kind of a badass. Like she is saving the day because she has a brilliant plan that no one else came up with and presumably couldn't have come up with.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that always makes me laugh about this so far, this come up several times, is like, this only has like an 8.9% chance of success. Like they're coming up with these ultra specific probabilities of things and stuff like that, I can't imagine how that would actually work, but it makes me laugh when it happens, a little bit. But yeah, I love when she's busting in there to these military guys and going, yeah, no, I'm going to take your toy from you. And
they're so depressed. They're like, well, you can't do that. And they're like, but they know, they're like, she can do that. Like she definitely can. Like, anyway, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, that scene, was, I think, probably one of the lighter scenes in it. This episode didn't have a lot of humor in it. It didn't have a lot of lighter moments, and that was one of the few that stuck out, of like, her just flexing her political muscle there and taking their toy from them was kind of funny.
Yeah, the episode was like, you'd say it was full of shoe leather plot progression. It was very, this. We're not like sitting in too much stuff the way a lot of the past episodes have been. So yeah, they set up, there's a ticking clock, it's attacking the base, it's drilling through these shields, it's going to take 6 hours to penetrate. The Eva needs to be replaced, its breastplate's melted, and so they've kind of put it up on blocks to kind of fix it. And they say that Shinji's brain is okay or his body is okay or something. They say I think his mental state's intact or something, but he's just not waking up. So he's his physical body is somehow not okay because he's not conscious. You said the 8.9 thing. That's an action movie trope. Like in Star Wars, like you can't hit the fucking whatever, and then I bullseyed the Womp Rats. So it's like that's an action, but it's definitely an anime for sure. And then she also talks about consulting the Magi supercomputers, which I talked about with Ryan and Jeff in the last episode, where they referenced Balthazar and Melchior, I think, and those are two of the Magi supercomputers. So again, like world building tracking, like those have been mentioned before, and now that's coming back. And I guess these supercomputers are calculating the odds of certain plans, and maybe they came up with the plan, the supercomputers, or maybe Masato like plugged it in. They're like, this is an 8.9, but that's kind of part of that I wanted to bring up because again, like sci-fi is so cool, and part of it's because of details like that, and it's just cool to talk about and think about. Again, like that's just how I like delving into fictional worlds. Is like the world building and tech of it all. Are there any things that you really like the tech of, like any movies or properties?
One thing that this show has reminded me of a few times, and I mean this in a positive way, even though this is sort of like a negative stereotype. Like, are you familiar with the website TV Tropes, where they list off all the common tropes in movies and TV shows and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course, definitely.
Okay, there's one called Engaging Chevrons. Comes from Stargate SG-1. Whenever the writers needed to fill time, they would do like, they know the Stargate spinning and have the guy Walter going Chevron 1 encoding, Chevron 1 locked, Chevron 2 encoding. Like they would kill a minute doing that in the early episodes because they just did not have enough content. And
That's so good.
I feel like there were also a lot of engaging chevrons in this episode specifically. Like I think every episode has had at least one instance where I've noticed like they were kind of like killing time with that. But this one had a lot of those where, they were talking about, the drill is proceeding at this many meters per second, and it's going to hit this at this time and this at this time. And they keep coming back to these countdown clocks. And, when towards the end of it, I know we're skipping ahead a little bit, but towards the end, when they're like switching the power banks over from like the city as they're saying, okay, zone 1 to 4, like, oh, this was actually, so in the subtitles, this was here. In the dub, they don't actually say it. But when they're showing all the power being transferred over later, the I guess the Japanese had all of this, like, zone 1 switching over, zone 2 switching over, zones 3 and 8 are switched over now, zone 12 is like when we're just seeing like the graphics change. But I feel like this show does that a lot.
Yeah.
And it does it in a much more enjoyable way than Stargate did, but I still recognize that it's happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's so funny. And again, if we think about this episode, looks a little sloppy. It looks a little weird. It is action packed, but it's at a point in probably the show's production where they were running low on resources. They spent a lot of time and money on a lot of other episodes up to this point, up till including the last episode was pretty visually stunning, I think. So, they're making up a lot of money in a lot of ways, including, with the Chevron thing for sure. I like the world building, but I think, most of it's not very important. Like the idea that the rifle's a positron rifle doesn't matter. The idea that the shields are doing this and that doesn't matter. The idea that there's 22 layers of nerve shielding doesn't really matter. None of that stuff like ends up mattering anyway. It just is there. I don't know. I also get a big shield. Oh, go ahead.
The difference I felt in this episode was like in past episodes, every slow scene was slow for a reason. Every bit of technobabble was actually teaching you some of the lore. And I feel like in this episode, there were a lot of like just time killers. They were doing some technobabble that I don't think really paid off at any point during the episode.
No,
and things like that.
And I don't think it comes back either. No, I think it's good. I think it's fair. Like, we've gushed about this series incessantly, nonstop, the whole run, and I do think this episode, comparatively, does not hold up the same way that these other ones have. That's fine, and not everything can be balls to the wall. So maybe you need a break too. So that's fine. But I think it's fair to critique. I
mean, I like this episode. I just feel like this could have been half an episode, and they could have filled it with some more plot, or something, if they had the budget or whatever reason they made to do this. this could have been cut down significantly and still told the same story. And I don't feel like we would have missed any of the emotion or the drama behind it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. One thing about this episode is the glasses guy is back. He before like Masato like comes up with their plan, they're like, oh, they're gonna drill into the thing, and looks like Shinji's out of the game, and the glasses guy is like, hey, you want to wave the white flag? Which is, it seemed like a joke. It's presumably like a cheerful, like, hey, it's fine. I mean, this is all life and death, but hey, you gotta chin up, which again, this guy, I really like this character. I think he's pretty cool. And so that like one of his first like lines with real personality to it being like, hey, let's give up. Like is and then he's like, hey, you want to give up, Major? And Major's like, no, I got a plan. It's like a fun, dynamic. And I just love that character. So yeah, they get a big shield that can block the laser that the angel can shoot. And Shinji wakes up. And again, there's this role reversal with Rei, where Rei comes in with the cart and she's looking at Shinji. And she's explaining, instead of Shinji like saying, I'll pilot the robot instead of Shinji, Rei's saying, you will pilot the robot. I am a robot. I am coldly explaining to you the details of the mission, and you will do this. Instead of him emotionally deciding to go on the mission, she's coldly conveying him mission details that he apparently has no choice in. He's like, do I have to? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, okay. And then he's like, well, wait, I don't fucking want to do it. And then she's like, oh, well, then don't do it. And he's like, what? And she's like, I'll do it. It's fine. And obviously she has no emotion, but you kind of get like subtextually, to me, it's like she would never say that she would rather do it than him. But him saying, I don't want to do it, to her, undeveloped mind, is enough of a fantastical, like made up pretense where she can be all like, well, let's throw him in the trash. I'm the guy now. It's up to me now. I'll be the Shinji. No need to worry. And she's like, but she's not presenting that to him that way. She's seeing this is my chance, but he's like, man, Ray's so helpful or whatever, Ray's like, oh man, someone is understanding my plight, like he's kind of like relating to her in a way that she's probably not relating, right? Is that kind of your read on the situation?
Yeah, I think so too. And there was one thing that in that scene really stood out to me that seemed out of place was towards the end of it, he's looking terrible. He's in bed. He's naked in bed under a sheet.
Right. Yeah. And she has no reaction to that until he realizes, and he freaks out. And again, that's a reversal. Go ahead.
Right. Just what she says in the English dub is, don't show up there looking like that. And he looks down, sees that he's naked, and then kind of freaks out. And I've like, that seems out of place because of how just nonchalant she was about walking around naked in front of him. So I backed it up, and I just, I've got these very literal subtitles that I can turn on. I turn those on, and apparently what she's saying in Japanese is different. She's saying, wake up, you can't go in there looking like that. And he kind of like, that explains kind of why he looks around a little bit first and then looks down and realizes he's naked. Like, to me, that made a lot more sense for her to not focus on him not having clothes on, but like, hey, if you're gonna do this, you can't look half asleep. You gotta snap out of this a little bit. And
yeah, go ahead.
I wish that's what she would have said in the dub,
Yeah. That's the thing about translations, and it's hard, like who knows what, and like even the ones you're looking at might not be super, I'm sure they are, but like the ones that I got said like, wear this, because she throws the uniform at him, and she's like, wear this, as if like she's saying he'll show up naked. And I think all of these translations get at this idea, who knows what the actual intent is, but to me, like how I read that was, the last time we met, I was naked in my house. And Shinji kind of like made a big deal about it and threw all these clothes everywhere and freaked out. And then I put on my clothes. And when I was putting on my clothes, he was staring at me like I wasn't supposed to put on my clothes, and now this is the opposite position. Now he's acting super normal, even though he's naked. And we're talking about leaving, and he's not caring about the fact that he's not wearing clothes, and he's not trying to put on his clothes, and he's not weirded out by the fact that he's not wearing clothes. Is he just going to go to Nerve without clothes? I got to remind him because, again, I'm not capable of forming the thought. This is a human being that's capable of putting on his own clothes. I better remind him because, again, the last situation we were in gives me the reason to believe that he might not understand the situation because of, this is like a Dunning-Kruger thing with clothes. But, so she's like, remember to actually put on clothes before you leave the house. I remember last time you were watching me put on clothes, you thought I was weird. And I was like, what? So I just want to make sure like you're clear on this. You wear clothes. I don't know. That was kind of like, I'm sure a
I
lot of that's headcanon, but that's kind of a bit how I was reading it.
I like your interpretation much better than mine, so I think I'm just going to adopt yours.
All right, great.
I think too, one of the things that he says in this scene is where he says something like, where it's something like, I feel like all I've been doing lately is apologizing. That was the most real thing he said in this whole episode. Like that was where the most of his lines in this episode could have been somebody else in the same role, that they didn't feel like him, that it wasn't his self-doubting, his self everything, but like his really sullen way. He's just like, I feel like all I've been doing lately is apologizing to people, was the defining moment that made it him again in this episode,
Yeah, and
to me
that's
that
maybe,
stuck out a lot.
and it's like that's a moment of mature self-reflection, huh? Which he's maybe not had the same way. Which to talk a little bit off of the last episode, I got this book called like Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents or something, which is a book I heard about. And that's, again, like there's a lot of factors that led to that rant. And one of them was like understanding emotional immature parents, which like got me like gave me words to the idea that my parents fucked up in non-obvious ways, because it's so easy to be like, my parents fucked up in obvious ways. And it's so easy to be like, I'm making a big deal out of nothing. And it's easier to be like, here's a specific non-obvious way someone can fuck up, and be like, well, there you go. That's the answer. It's not black. It's not white. It's gray, And so I've been going through that, and it's very good. And like, Evangelion going through that has also been a part of this too. Is like it's talking about the same dynamics. And so watching this episode after reading some of this book, it's like it's all the same shit. It's all the same loop, man. It's fucking crazy. I don't have a Dr. Pepper to beep, but it's fucking nuts. Like that thing just was like, I do that all the time, especially the apologizing. And then the apologizing is you're dysregulated, and so you're looking for emotional validation because you don't have like emotional security. And so that's why he's apologizing. And he's like, why am I doing that? And it's like, yeah, you're doing that because you're trying to get this validation, but you don't even know that to put words to it. So you're kind of like emptily apologizing because it feels right, and you're like, this isn't right because it's not right. But so yeah, you could definitely like read this book alongside watching this series, and it would blow your mind, especially when we're talking about repressed Japanese culture, depression without understanding it through words, growing up disconnected from your parental figures like Shinji does, like very, very much tied into this stuff. It's crazy. But so like there's like that part felt like that to me, where like Shinji is kind of like he's trying to form like a real connection to her, or he perceives it, but she just I don't think she really sees it that way necessarily. Anyway,
Yeah, they both
so
seem
go ahead.
emotionally immature in different ways,
Hmm.
and they're both just like so on different levels. They're just not connecting. They're every time either one of them makes an attempt to connect to the other one, it just falls flat because they're just so far apart in what they're doing.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like she's the childlike like godlike attachment, and he's the doubt. I want to say in Steven Universe, the characters are based on psychological dependencies or something, whereas like uh Pearl is like group dependent, and like Steven is like group dependent, and then Pearl is like or no, Steve is just dependent, I think. And then Pearl is like group dependent. And then Amethyst is like counter dependent. And then then Garnet healthy. It's some, I don't know what it is. It's something like independent maybe. And like it's like the stages of psychological development. First you're a baby, you're just fully dependent. And then you start to form this structure that you imagine yourself as part of, and then you rebel against that structure as you inform your individual identity, and then you synthesize those two kind of parts of yourself as you integrate like completely into society. And so I think there's an extent to which Ray is completely dependent like a baby and thus has utter trust, or is the one that Pearl is in this metaphor, where she kind of needs this structure and needs to believe in it and strictly adhere to it. That's why she has such trust in Gendo and slapped him when he doubted that, whereas Shinji is more of this counter dependent, like Amethyst, which Amethyst is this rebel. She's like the wild seed, and she's rebelling. And that's, that's the terrible twos, that's a kid exerting its individuality by rebelling against what it used to identify as. And so I think Shinji is kind of doing that. Anyway, that was not in my notes. That's just something organic. What else? So the thing in whatever I watched, they set up like Ray is like, I will drive the robot and you will stay here. And then in the next scene, you see both of the robots, right? Is that what happened in your cut? Which is like,
Yes.
well, what's going on? And then so Shinji's back in. They don't really explain it, except Misato's just telling them what to do, and now Shinji's on board. And so you get the sense that maybe Ray was like, I'll do it. And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Shinji, get in the robot. And Shinji's like, okay. And Ray was like, but, and they're like, Ray, get in the robot. And she's like, okay. And then it was just over, like presumably something happened and it didn't matter, who knows? Did you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, and Ray seemed disappointed that her job was just defend him. I think she kind of my take on that scene was that she felt like she should be the one in charge. And if anything, he should be covering her because she's more experienced or better at this or whatever her reasoning was. Like she just seemed almost shocked and hurt that she was just only there to support him.
I mean, that's the thing is the last scene, she said, I will do this. You won't do this. And so, yeah, we see her not doing this instead of him. So of course she's going to be a little disappointed, right? And again, like it's not explicit, but presumably behind the scenes there must be a scene that we didn't see, where at some point something happened where Ray was like, "Here's my plan," and they're like, "No, that's crazy." And Shinji's like, "No, it's a good plan. I hate driving the robot. I am scared." And they're like, we're adults, we're in charge. It doesn't matter what you children fucking want. And then, obviously they need validation. And so they put up with that. And so now they're both a bit raw and a bit like shit on the tarmac there. Shinji's out there. That's a reveal, is that Shinji's there. You're not sure. And then he's definitely out there. So it's like, oh, I guess he is going to be involved in the plan. And again, it's not really a tension. Like they're not arguing about it anymore. But again, yeah, both of them feel a bit bummed and raw. And so it's like, yeah, was there this scene where they just got fucked over and now it sucks? And so, yeah, and it all sets out. Ray
I feel like
says,
that maybe made them bond a little bit on both of them not getting what they wanted, though. Like this was the first time where I feel like they both were like, this is not playing out the way I want. And maybe felt a little bit of camaraderie there because they both kind of like are unhappy with the situation.
Now they're in the same position, and they haven't been in the same position before because they haven't known anything about each other. They've essentially been competitors for Gendo's love, and they don't know what to do. In the last episode, basically, we kind of learned that Ray has been fucked up. That's why she fails the test, because she's been fucked up about Shinji's appearance. And, and then the incident with Gendo calms her down enough that she passes the test. And I think on some level, that's her realizing that Shinji's not the threat she might have assessed him as. And so before they were like, we don't even know how each other fit, and we're kind of competitors. And now, by both being in a position where they both don't want to do the thing they're doing, Ray doesn't want to play support, she wants to be in charge, she doesn't want Shinji involved, Shinji doesn't want to be involved, he wants Ray to do it, and they both don't get that. So now they're both in a position where they both don't get to what they want from their caregivers, and they're both identifying with each other about the things where they both wanted the same thing finally, instead of we're competing for what they thought was the same thing. And now they both don't get it in a way that, maybe has always happened, but they're able to understand that they're in the same problem, they're in the same boat, and they were always, because they both have this fucked up relationship with Gendo, so they both have this hole, but now they're in it together in the same, in a way that they weren't before. And Ray is, and so like before they get in, like Shinji's like, why do you want to pilot it? Because again, like we talk about this, like confident, like Ray is believing and he's not. It's like he's afraid that he'll die, and she's not afraid she'll die. She believes fully in 8.9%, but a normal person wouldn't believe in 8.9%, and she does. And we clock that as weird, and we clock Shinji as mature for understanding that's scary, right? And so like he's like, why? I don't get it. I don't get you. And then she says it's my link, and so like that like really fucked me up. And yeah, I'll get into it a little bit. But just like for her, the idea that I'm not attached to my life. That's not a value I have. But like B, like the only value I do have is this very tenuous link with other people that I don't understand. To the extent I understand it, I only understand that if I'm in a robot, I'm connected to people, right? And so that's part of what's driving her. It's her link. It's her link, So it's her link. It's more her link than her being alive is a link to anything, which is really tragic, and it strikes Shinji, and it is obviously related to, because it's maybe not as serious for him, but a part of why he gets in the robot is because he wants to link with his father, but he doesn't need a link to everybody that way. He just is very much missing this link with his father that he's trying to connect. And so from that point, after episode 2, he starts making connections to other people, and so he's getting links that Ray isn't, right? Anyway, but to talk about me specifically, stuff that I've been going through, so I have issues with parental, let's just say parental baggage. I wanted validation from my parents, and so at a point I realized that my parents were bad in a way I couldn't define. Like, it wasn't that they were bad people, they just sucked or whatever. And so when I started doing Harmontown and stuff, I moved out of my parents' house, and I was like, I don't need to talk to my parents. They're bad. I've already figured out that they're bad. And now I have these new adults that can give me like parental validation. And that was very conscious. I don't know how healthy that was, or I thought that was, but it was very conscious. And it didn't seem like a big deal. But that's not like, it's different than like going out and trying to do stand up to get a crowd to like you, because a crowd might give you non-specific parental validation in a similar way. It's very direct, and it maps those relationships very directly. And I thought my relationship was maybe more healthy with my parents than it was, and maybe my parents were fucked up. And I brought my own problems, my own baggage to this whole situation without having any realization of it. And so then my performance grew from a need to please my parents onto a need to kind of perform for the audience, but B, this new family unit of Harmontown and Dan and Aaron and Jeff. And that is like, was kind of not, that's not performing for an audience or a comedy. You might do stand up because you want to, get validation because you didn't get validation in life, but you made that choice because you're like, I want validation. You don't go like, oh, this specific group of people will validate me and that'll make me happy and feel like loved. That's like, it's broken. It's like a broken causality. And so me as a performer, everything the audience knows about me is a performer who wasn't performing for himself, but was performing for that group of people who was a very clear analog for their parents. And so I stopped doing Harmontown, and I kind of stopped working for Dan. And so then all of that kind of substitute validation stopped existing, right? And so then I can get some of that from working with Jeff on a new podcast with a new audience. And so that happens. And then it's like, as that's falling away, and as Jeff is falling away, and I'm still doing the show to get what semblance of validation I can from the audience, is what like random fragment of this surrogate family kind of I'm trying to please, right, is still remaining. I'm also being like, well, wait, it wasn't like my idea. I wasn't like going to an open mic, right? I didn't just like be like, I want to perform. Here's Spencer the performer. And now I'm Spencer for the performer. What is Spencer the performer? Right? Spencer the performer doesn't perform. He's not a performer. He just like got validation and didn't need performing, and didn't turn to all this, but here I am. I'm not terrible. I wouldn't say I'm like great at performing or content creation, but I'm not terrible. And so now it's like, well, what would a healthy version that wasn't just trying to impress my parents and was trying to make a positive creative output, what would that look like, right? And I think that's also the problem I've been struggling with the whole time about how this podcast isn't anything, right? About how it needs to be something. It's like, well, what it isn't is getting specific people to validate me that I thought were stand-ins for my parents. Now it's just performance for no reason. So now it needs a reason. Anyway, that's a big aside. Okay. You got any thoughts on that?
I mean, well, I didn't have anywhere near the same journey you did in any of this. What
Sure.
you're saying kind of echoes what some of my motivations were. People keep asking me, like, why did you get involved with Harmontown in the first place? How did that happen? Which isn't really an interesting story, but I devoted a lot of time to that, and everyone kept asking me, why are you doing this? Like, you're not even getting paid for this. Why do you give up every Sunday night to manage a live show, edit it, post it at 4 a.m, and stick this crazy schedule and all this? And to me, looking back at it, echoes what you in that there was something really validating of like me doing some new sequence or something and showing it to Dan and him going, "Hey, that's really good," was
Right,
to
that's
me like
validation.
mind blowing.
Right. And
Because I'm like,
emotionally immature parents can't give you validation. So when you get
Right.
that, you're like, wait, this is a new thing. This is like heroin that I've never had my whole life. What even is this? I don't know how to understand what this is. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, exactly. Like I would be showing him what I would consider to be like a mock-up of something that wasn't very good, and he'd be like, "This is great. Let's post it." And that was like, like you said, like that was like heroin. Or the few times that I would make Jeff belly laugh, me not being a comedian at all, making comedians laugh was like, this is a drug. This is amazing.
Yeah. And so,
And
like, something we're not getting from our parents, now we're getting from people that kind of maybe a little remind us of our parents. And so that's addicting, and we want to be around it all the time, right? Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off again.
no, that's what I was going to say, but much better and shorter. Like, to everybody, I'm the computer guy, and I can very easily do some insane thing on a computer that makes everyone go, "Oh wow, how did you do that?" And to me, that means nothing now. That's my identity. That's what I do. It's like someone going to Spider-Man going, "Oh my God, you can shoot webs," and he's like, "Yeah, that's my power. That's what I do."
Yeah. Do you
And
have more?
to like
Sorry.
go
Yeah.
into this like entirely different group of people that are all like I really think like the group of people that I met through Harmontown and all that are some of the most talented people. Like the people that do the shows with Straub Home Video now and all this, like there's this whole circle. All of you guys are, I really feel like, the most talented people I've ever worked with.
Yeah, we're just
And
fucked up.
well, yeah, yes,
Go
but
ahead.
everybody
It is fine. Go ahead.
And to have you guys like accept me into your circle, even though I'm obviously an outsider to all of this, like I'm not funny, I'm not a producer, I'm not a director, I'm not a cinematographer, but for me to like be like, "Hey, here's my best. Is this good enough for you?" And to have you guys go, "Yes, please join us," was exactly what I needed at that time in my life. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're saying there too.
And that's the thing in the book. Like, honestly, you should read the book just because it kind of gives words to a lot of this stuff, which is really helpful. But like, yeah, that's the thing. And so again, we're being deprived of this nutrient that humans get, and that we maybe even thought we were getting because everybody else were getting, and we didn't seem too different than them. So you're like, yeah, everything's normal. And it's like, no, you've been deprived of like nitrous fertilizer or whatever. And then you get it randomly, and you're like, what the fuck is even happening? And then you just got to get it. And then you start to, but the thing is that grows a healthy self-esteem too. It's just, it has to be, integrated healthy. So it doesn't become addiction and like serving on whatever, like I'm not pretending to be like an expert of all this thing, but to the extent that I was talking about the loop is this fucking book. And, to the extent that I'm not talking about communism, I think like, I think it can all just be this book. I think if I'm mad at communism, I'm mad at people being emotionally immature, or I'm being emotionally immature. It's the book. If the book combines with communism, I think we can save the world. Anyway, but so okay, so they do it. They miss. Oh, they shoot the gun, and the angel, it shoots a laser, and it's cool because it's not going to dodge, but it shoots a laser that like creates like a warp in space or an energy magnetic like a deflection or something, but it like makes the lasers warp and deflect in all different ways. And is that too harsh of a transition? Like I don't mind talking about this stuff. It's just like I just don't want to feel like I'm like I feel like I can sound stupid because I'm too excited about something I don't understand super well enough, But it's good to move on, right? That's fine. Probably fine.
No, I think that's the beauty of what you've made this podcast into is that we can have a premise and then, sort of like Harmontown, we go off on tangents, and those tangents are just as entertaining as the original premise. So
Yeah.
I like, yeah, keep going, please.
Yeah, as long as it's just, I don't know. It's good. And I'm good at the podcast. It's good. It's good and I'm good at it. But it's a pretty cool scene, in an episode with not a lot of good shots. That's maybe one of the only good shots is when the laser kind of helixes around and then, they got to reload and oh no, we're all going to die, but they don't because they shoot. But it shoots a laser at Shinji and Rei blocks it like she said she would with the shield, and she's getting melted because of how much laser is getting lasered, and he fires back and he gets the angel and the angel dies. And yeah, they save the day, right? So Rey is so melted in her robot from withstanding so much laser that now she's basically in the same position she was in the last episode. And now Shinji is in the position that Gendo was in, where he pulls out the pilot plug, he opens up the pilot plug, and in terms of parallels, it's interesting where his hands don't burn because he's wearing the gloves, and so it's like, oh, so I guess these are like heat proof gloves. I don't know, just another little like quick detail or something. And yeah, he gets her out, and it's like this exact. It's obviously a parallel to the Gendo scene, and they make a connection, and again, this feels kind of one sided. I think we're supposed to believe they make somewhat of a connection, but it feels very one sided, where Shinji's really happy she's okay and she's just kind of out of it and doesn't care about her life very much. And so she's just like, wait, what's going on? And then he looks kind of like Gendo and he's smiling and it's reminding her of Gendo. And she's like, I don't know what to do. You're sending all this emotional energy at me and it doesn't really mean anything to me. I don't know what to do with it. And I don't know what to do in situations like that. And he's like, you could try smiling. And then she smiles and it looks like shit. But I like, I just thought that like, she smiled because Gendo was smiling. And so I'm like, is she maybe imagining Gendo and is just like mimicking smiling to deal with this in interaction? Or is she really having an emotional moment with Shinji? Because I feel like we're supposed to believe she is, but also it's like, it kind of reads more like he thinks they are and she's not. Like she's thinking about another guy, kind of, I don't know. Was that not your read, or what was your read of that?
Yeah, I mean, like again, I don't want to just dump on this episode, but like the last 5 minutes of it was just one unsatisfying scene after another. Like to back up even a little bit, like when the school kids were sitting like kind of on that roof waiting for, like, no, I promise they're gonna appear here, they're gonna,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
they're
yeah.
waiting. I didn't get the point of that scene. Like that could have been deleted and not change the episode in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um, and then there was that quick shot of the penguin appearing again too. And for the first time, I wasn't happy to see the penguin because that shot just made no sense. Like maybe I like okay, yeah, everyone's supposed to be evacuated, little backpack. I get it, but like every time before, like I was trained to be like, oh, the penguin, this is going to be funny, clap, clap, and it wasn't. It was just the penguin with his backpack on, and I was like, that's the joke. That's not the comedy relief I was waiting for. And when we get to like the final scene where he takes a shot, like, and because they had, gone through all of the effort, the kind of like the Chekhov's gun thing of like, okay, if you need to take a second shot, this is what you're gonna need to do. So of course he's gonna miss the first shot. Otherwise, why would they
Right.
withdraw
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Exactly.
So like there was no tension there whatsoever because like I knew he was gonna miss the first shot and he had to make the second shot or this whole thing was just pointless. And then, when her Eva falls over and he goes over to rescue her and all this, of course he's going to save her.
Mhm.
Like there was no way they were going to recreate that scene with his father and have it end badly. Like
Right. Yeah.
I felt like the last 5 minutes were just so predictable and unfulfilling. Like it told the story, and I know we had to get past that, but there was just like some needless filler. And like you were right, like I don't think she was showing the emotion he wanted to show, which kind of like in the past episodes was like, yeah, he's asking for something she's not giving, and that's a relatable emotion, and I get that. Here, it's just a kind of a confusing mess of like no one knows what they want at this point, and he's happy and she's not happy, and you know, like it wasn't the same satisfying, gut wrenching, he's trying to find love where he's not going to get it or something or whatever. This was just
Yeah.
like this.
Just not a lot of clarity.
Yeah, it left me just going, this wasn't a very satisfying ending of this episode. The next one needs to clear up a lot of stuff, or this is going downhill.
Yeah. Yeah. But
What
man, it did.
in your
I don't know. It
mind,
just go ahead.
what what was the penguin scene there for? Like that was a quick shot. Was that supposed to be comedy there? Like was that supposed to
I
be?
I don't think I even caught it. Now that you mention it, I do remember seeing a penguin. But yeah, I never clocked it in my mind. I didn't even really pay too much attention to the seed with the kids, at the school kids. But I
Well,
think
that
the
was
way
my
you
point.
explained the way you explained it makes me think if there was a reason, maybe it's now Shinji is actually making a positive effort to connect to people, as seen in the end where he tells her to smile. That's him kind of like making an emotional bid, and like he's capable of making an emotional bid now because he's surrounded by all these people that are working together. Like everybody's working together. We actually don't see a lot of fucked up dynamics in this episode, huh? Like the kids are there on part because they feel connected. They're wanting to support him or they just want to be involved, And so maybe you see the kids and then you see Pen Pen and it's kind of like, oh, and Pen Pen's there too. Everybody's there. It's like for the first time, everybody's together in a sense. They're all in the same episode. So maybe that I think the thing is like, to your complaint, I think, if this moment is a confusing moment that ends this way, probably could have been half an episode, but they wanted to like get ahead production wise, so they like expanded it into a full episode or something like that. But as a result, it feels very light and very bloated. I didn't have as much of a problem with it as you, but if I want to analyze it and critique it, I think that makes sense as a take for sure. Yeah. So I don't really have any other, any big final thoughts other than like just that Ray line really fucked me up. It really made me cry a lot because it's like to the extent that Ray's robot is her link, like me podcasting is my link to humanity in the same way I'm as fucked up as Ray. And I am fucked up as Ray in ways that Shinji is fucked up, even though I am more like Shinji than Ray. But like Shinji and Ray are very similar, I think that's the thing. It's like I feel like this emotional immaturity thing in the book, it talks about like it in kind of stark terms, but it also talks about how like, oh, if you got raised by someone who's emotionally immature, you might have some of these like damages that make you kind of like that or whatever. And I feel like I have a mode that's maybe more like Shinji, which is more keeping it together and maybe more normal and healthy. And then I have this mode that's very more like this dysregulated Ray, like the more like when she failed the test, where it's like I don't even know what the fuck is happening. But the thing is, like, that's not me a lot of the time, but it's me enough of the time where it's not just like, oh, sometimes I'm weird. It's like, no, this is a huge struggle for me. And so I feel like this strong kind of dichotomy very strongly in both of these characters. And that's something I've been dealing with too. Interesting stuff. Any other final thoughts before we break into our award-winning segment?
The only other thing, and you kind of touched this a little bit, but I think like the redeeming moment for like the final act of this episode was like, just as they're getting in, into the Evas and she says goodbye to him. And he's like, what's wrong? Don't say goodbye. Don't do that. Like that was, I think, like for him, like he was almost like recoiling in horror at her at this of like, you're more messed up than I thought you were. And if anything, that motivated him a little bit. I liked that brief interaction there where he's like, I think for the first time telling her, you were messed up. And the way he put that of like, don't ever say goodbye. That's not how, that's not how you go into this.
Yeah.
Is, for one, the biggest bit of, I think, character development that we've seen in her throughout a lot of this is the fact that she's just really just does not care at all. Like it's not so much that she's just broken physically and mentally from piloting these things. It's just she just does not care anymore. And to see him for the first time care in a way of being like, don't say goodbye, was, I think, probably the most powerful part in this episode for me.
That's so interesting. I want to say that I think like that it's I don't think it's that Ray doesn't care anymore. It's just that like she never learned how to care. It's like never occurred to her to care about her life. It's not like she used to have a sense of self and it got beaten out of her. I mean, maybe she did, I don't know. But to me, it feels more of like this blank slate thing than this. But who knows? But I will say that to me, I did interpret it very differently, which is again like more of this kind of like more of an autism hat thing where it's like Ray just said farewell because she's a weirdo who doesn't understand what words mean. And that farewell is like this really chilling, dark thing to say. She's saying, I'll see you in a second. And he has a lot of trauma and baggage and insecurity that he's tying to his relationship with other people and is now these potential budding feelings for this person and and mapped onto his apparent lack of a mother, his weird relationship with Masato, his weird relationship with Gendo who's tied to Ray, and so he's putting insecurity on his words and being like, what the fuck, man, you're gonna leave me? And she's like, what? And so it's like he's putting all this emotional stuff on it that's just not what she's doing at all. And it's because she doesn't think about her self-preservation. She doesn't necessarily think that saying farewell is a weird thing to do. And she doesn't know or even care about the fact that she will or won't die. I think she doesn't think she's going to die, but it's just not what's on her mind. She's just, again, she's linked because she's in the robot now. And so now she's feeling self-actualized and validated and loved in a way. And that's enough, and she doesn't have to think past that. But Shinji's too afraid. So he can't, he can think past that to the fear and stuff. And so that's kind of how I clocked it, was just like, he's like, don't you leave me too. And she's like, I don't care. Goodbye. Like,
that's really interesting. And, you have the advantage of knowing what happens next and I don't. So I don't know how much of this is me just having a just totally wrong take on this.
Well, I don't know either. Yeah. And I don't know what I'm applying to it or not, because I feel like I'm on a very personal psychological journey that I'm also putting this through a lot, very heavily also, probably well before my knowledge of the plot of this, but they're both coming into it, right?
Yeah. Because I took that completely differently, of like her just being like, yeah, this is my job, and we're probably like one of us is not gonna survive the next 10 minutes, so goodbye, and him being like, what is wrong with you? Even if that's what you think, you don't say it.
Exactly.
You don't go into it saying that. I want to rewatch that now, and like,
me too. Well,
I just completely blew this.
No, that's the benefit of watching it multiple times before we record, huh? I mean, we're learning it. I heard this, we're building the plane as it flies, which when you put it like that is a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. But to come up with how you're going to structure a podcast while you're making it is a much better idea than building an airplane while it flies, I think. But yeah, so that's this episode. It's time for our new segment, or our old returning segment, a story told in 1 million little pieces. Do you remember the segment, Kevin?
I'm not sure. I remember you saying this, but I don't remember what it was you did.
This is a segment where I explain the story of One Piece, which is a very popular anime and manga series.
Yes, I do. Sorry.
It's okay. Don't. I mean, it's all good. I was curious if you were, and I didn't expect you would be, and I don't expect a lot of our listeners will be either. But it's fine.
No,
it's all good.
I was expecting you to do the One Piece thing. It was just the way you phrased that. I was like, wait, what? Okay.
Yeah. Man, my hair looks good. Should I get a haircut like this? Like, it kind of looks like a short haircut, right? It looks good, though.
It does.
Anyway.
I really like with long hair, though.
Thank you. Do you have any other compliments before we continue?
This is a good show, Spencer, and you're doing a good job.
I mean, it is. I'm so cool. I'm so smart. Okay. So we talked about this a little bit, but One Piece, it's this pirate world. There's these demon fruits. It's all covered in water. If you get the demon fruit, or if you eat the devil fruit, you gain magical powers, but you can't swim. You got Monkey D. Luffy. He's the main character. He's a pirate. He's a rubber man. He ate the gum gum fruit. It was a devil fruit. He can't swim. So that's the setup. In the last segment of a story told in a million little pieces, we learned about Luffy and how he became a pirate by talking to Shanks, who was a great pirate, and eventually he became a pirate after eating the gum gum fruit. He met a kid named Kobe. And he also rescued a guy named Zolo, the pirate hunter, which is Zolo. There's an LR thing in Japanese, so he's Zoro. I don't know if I'll call him Zoro or Zolo. I usually call him Zolo, but just think Zoro, same shit. So he meets Zoro, the pirate hunter, and he beats people in the Navy, who's the government, and he teams up with Zoro, the pirate hunter, and then his friend Kobe, who's a little kid, joins the Marines, and so now they go to a new town, and Luffy and Zoro get separated. And Luffy runs into this girl named Nami, and Nami's a thief, and she hates pirates, and she steals from pirates, and she's stealing from a pirate right now, and so she's in trouble. There's pirates attacking, and so Luffy gets involved in the pirates, and they get out of it. And Nami is like, "Hey, Luffy, you're pretty strong. Let's team up." And Luffy is like, "Yeah, I'm a pirate," and Nami's like, "But I hate pirates. Fuck you." And Luffy is like, "That's fine." And so Nami has like a map to this place called the Grand Line, and she's a good navigator, and Luffy's like, "We need a navigator," and she's like, "But I hate pirates." And so Nami's like, "Okay, it's fine, let's team up." But Nami tricks Luffy. She ties him up. She brings him to the pirates that were chasing them before. Those pirates are known as the Buggy Pirates. They're run by Buggy, this evil captain who has magical powers. And so Nami's like, here's Luffy. He's my boss. I stole from you. You were chasing me because I stole from you. That was because this guy, my boss, told me to. And now I'm turning him into you because I want to be on your team. And so she's swindling. She's double crossing. And so she sells Luffy out. And then so Buggy's like, "Okay, you're on my team now. But to prove your loyalty, you got to kill Luffy." And she gives him he gives her a cannon to shoot Luffy with. And so Nami's like, "I can't do it." And so then there's a big fight. Luffy almost gets killed with a cannon, but Zoro shows up and kills a bunch of people. And then they shoot the cannon at the bad guys, and then they all escape. And then it's like, Jesus Christ. And then there's just a big bunch of fights. And then they set up this dynamic where Zoro fights some of the strongest guys, and then Luffy fights whoever's in charge, which is Buggy. And Buggy has the power to shoot off his limbs and kind of telekinetically control his limbs. And so Buggy can be all in different places at once. And so what ends up happening is Luffy finds his legs and kicks him in the nuts because his legs are just somewhere else. And then they get the upper hand, and they tie up his limbs so his limbs can't fly around. And then they stick all of his hands, his extremities, his hands and his feet to his head. So now he's like a head with like his hands and feet sticking out of it. And then they basically throw him into the sun. And so they have his like body tied up, and then his head with his arms and hands are just thrown, like Team Rocket and Pokemon. They just get thrown. We're blasting off again. And then, they're like, "Wow, what a great adventure." And Nami's like, "Man, that was great. You guys are okay. You're not so bad, even though you're pirates." And then they have two boats, and it's kind of like they're going on together in two boats together. And that's that arc of One Piece. Do you have any questions?
I I believe every word that you're saying is real, but this sounds like something you're just making up as you go along. It's that just bonkers.
Yeah, there's also like a sequence where there's this dog that gets beaten up by a lion, and the dog's trying to protect this store, and the store gets burnt down, and so Luffy beats the shit out of the lion. He does this like suplex on it because the lion destroyed the dog's treasure, and he's like, "That's what pirates don't do, is try and take other people's treasure. We gotta treasure our treasure." And that's like, yeah, it's this dog that's like a badass because it's standing up against the lion and saving a store. It's all about dreams and like idealism. And so Luffy is like stubborn and ideal and stupid but it doesn't matter. And people are like, "Wow, Luffy's right. We don't have to do stupid things. We can just be stupid in a cool way." So it's a very weird story. It's very bizarre and comedic, but it's fun. Yeah, that's our show. I think, I don't know. Is that our show? Do you have anything?
Uh, no, I don't think so. I've been awake now for almost 48 hours straight, so I barely know I'm in a podcast right now.
Wow.
So,
Well, you've been
um,
doing a great job. I think we all love this.
well, I caffeinated myself heavily before the show. So maybe that's my secret is I just need to do that before every show now.
Yeah, maybe. That's the secret. Kevin stays woke, you know? Anyway. But so what do we how do we end the show is like uh, that probably got cut off by Zoom, right? I just burped real loud.
No,
Uh
that came through. That came
okay,
through.
thank God. Thank God. So I want to like still got to come up with like a real Spencer Chan voice, huh? Like a that's our show. I'm the Spencer Chan. I'm sleepy Spencer Chan, and now it's time to go to bed. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
See
yeah,
it? I
lean
don't
into
know.
Goofy a little bit more, and I think he does.
I'm Goofy Eeyore. I'm a large, stuffy thing that's not depressed because I take Zoloft. All right, see you, folks.